The floods in 2002 arrived after long weeks of severe droughts. In comparison with similar calamities which had occurred in recent decades in Central Europe, the damage they caused broke all existing records. Both the meteorologists and climatologists stopped talking about climate change as a mere presumption. The fact is, global warming and a rise in temperatures have become a stark truth. Unfortunately, extreme weather patterns are becoming more and more frequent.
The cause of climate changes is anthropogenic in origin, meaning it's the result of human activities. It's mainly the change of the chemical composition of the atmosphere. For example, the release of greenhouse gases, and particularly of carbon dioxide, that is responsible for this state. If things continue as they have up to the present, and humanity does not take any relevant steps to stop its activities, it may happen that over the course of the next 100 years, 35 billion tons of carbon will be emitted onto the atmosphere, and 100 years from now, the average global temperatures will rise by 5.8 degrees centigrade from the present levels. This would indeed be a large-scale catastrophe.
In the latter half of the 1990s, the prevailing opinion in the scientific community was that the dominant cause of global warming was an increase in greenhouse gases.
But it's not only greenhouse gases that are to blame. We humans are also to blame for removing water from large areas of the Earth's surface, of drying these areas out. So instead of the shades forest, we have hot water where days are hot and nights are cold, like the steppes or the Sahara. Looking at measurements taken since around 1983, it seems to us that a greenhouse effect's producing factor of at least equal importance is the lack of plants growing on the Earth's surface, or the lack of water for evaporation.
It's only water that can, in all its forms, regulate and cool our environment. Moreover, each particle of water vapour also absorbs greenhouse gases. If there is little water in the atmosphere, then the effect of the greenhouse gases is even more adverse.
A drop or a molecule or water vapor molecule in the atmosphere also serves as a filter. For example, the Earth's thin protective envelope and interactive with the planet's dried out surface results in a doubling rise in temperature, which means that the recent climatic changes are growing in geometric series. This is not a linear process, though, since the atmosphere, the protective envelope, has been disassociating, resulting in sudden invasions of cold frontal systems and hot weather suddenly changing into cold, bringing sudden downpours.
Meteorologists in Slovakia have been analysing the weather since 1871. For 120 of those years, only 3 extreme years were recorded, while during the last decade of the 20th century, from 1990 to 2000, we've had 7 years with extreme weather fluctuations, accompanied by droughts and floods.
During 1991-1992, we noticed for the first time a change in the weather patterns to the effect that the winter was very cold, followed by an abnormally dry summer. I think we can say that the weather has appeared to have gone mad since those 2 years.
The weather really has gone mad. According to climatic zones, most of Europe belongs to a mild climate characterised by an even distribution of rainfall, or by 4 different seasons significantly distinguishable from one another. However, the weather has begun to behave as though we were in a climate zone characterised by conditions prevalent in the steppes.
From our research and satellite observations, it seems that the problem has, at minimum, a pan-European dimension. It's not only our country that has been drained of its water, all the neighboring countries have been as well, some much more drastically. France, for example, has been extensively drained. Germany and Spain are lacking water to such an extent that much of these countries have become a semi-desert.
Some 170 years ago, we had half again as many forests as today. Clear-cutting, where areas are completely cleared of trees, at that time was an exception in the mountainous and spring areas of Europe. Today, the areas with dried-out forests, marked by erosion, have been growing every day without restraint. Even in the last century, the agricultural landscape was still interlaced with copses of trees and bushes that also contributed to keeping water in the land. On their small plots of fields, farmers could plough along contour lines that can still be seen on preserved terraces today in some regions of Slovakia.
The date is 1950, the second year of the five-year plan. Following the Soviet agriculturalist experience, our cooperative farmers found that large-scale field plots allowed for better use of machinery. The balks that had created social boundaries before this and had often been the cause of many arguments regarding small pieces of land irretrievably disappeared from our fields.
In essence, farmers have been devastating the landscape since Neolithic times, but only in the last century, under the slogan, "We'll command the wind and the rain," did they accelerate the landscape drying out processes. From the 1950s, cooperative farmers in Czechoslovakia merged over 70% of tiny field plots into primarily giant corn fields. That was the start of the large-scale growth of cultivated steppe grass.
For over 1 million years, man has lived on Earth in the form he's in today. But he's been practicing agriculture for only 10,000 years. Over those 10,000 years, a number of civilizations have vanished. We can see the landscape of Afghanistan or pictures of the former Mesopotamia. In Iraq and Iran, this is because their agriculture is based on steppe plants, and steppe plants don't like flooding. So steppe conditions have to be prepared. Today, we've been preparing such conditions all over the country, by which I mean we've been draining the land and changing it into a steppe.
After World War II, the former Czechoslovakia was exchanging cereals for Russian oil, so the growth of this steppe crop became one of the most important political and trading rules. In the hunt for more bountiful yields, farmers created the best possible conditions to achieve them, no different from and essential for a steppe. Drainage pipes were placed deep in the earth in order to rid the soil of humidity. The pipelines canalised water into straightened canals. In the East Slovak and Danube lowlands, water was even pumped away in order to speed up the water outflow from fields. At that time, nobody perhaps realised that the creation of steppe conditions could, in the course of time, also bring about the creation of dry weather, as a predominating weather pattern in the steppes. The hunt for food self-sufficiency deprived the water of its storage reservoirs, spring montane and downs areas.
It's vital to keep water in the landscape in sufficient amounts, not only for plants, but also for the whole of nature. And today, it's essential for us to subordinate all the ways of soil cultivation to this task.
If the Earth's surface is dried, as in the steppe or semi-desert, it can greatly overheat the atmosphere. This, in turn, can disturb the currents of airflow, such that they then seem to behave as though they've stopped following their previous routes. The result is that weather forecasts are completely confused these days. There are no longer 4 different seasons in a mild climate. Spring and autumn are so short we barely notice them. In other words, the weather is as we, here on Earth, have made it.
If we don't change our cultivation of our soil and don't adjust ourselves to this change, in the future we can expect far more dramatic changes in nature.
It seems that the climatic threat scenarios are being fulfilled down to the last detail. The climatologists advise us to reduce greenhouse gases. They regard them as a kind of fatal solution. But though the greenhouse gases may be contributing to the chaos in the weather, like active volcanoes, even if we immediately stopped their production, we would only begin to see the results 100 years from now. So what are we going to do? Idly sit around waiting for further dramas to unfold?
It's the end of another summer's day, 5:30 p.m. The sun that has been shining the whole day, shedding 1,000 watts on each cubic meter. So 1,000 watts has been pouring down. The question is whether or not people influence this immense energy that's flowing down to our Earth every day. We can imagine two extreme situations. One, we can imagine that we have here a flooded meadow with a little fish pond and enough water and plants everywhere. Or a second situation, a concrete area here. When the energy of a nuclear plant, 1 block power, reaches the asphalt, and when we touch this 50 to 60 degrees centigrade hot area, we almost burn ourselves and realize that all the solar energy is changing into heat. But provided that there is enough vegetation and water here, by touching the grass or lying on it, we find that the grass's temperature is 20 degrees Celsius. Why? Because of water evaporation. Water passes through each plant that we see. Provided that it has enough water available, water flows first from the roots to the leaves and then through the pores to the air. And this is the brilliant cooling device that we have here on Earth, on the continent. It is, in fact, only thanks to water and water vapor that the sun's energy is distributed so that the temperature here is more balanced.
By eliminating water from the soil and by eliminating vegetation during most of the year from the soil surface, we have also eliminated water's unique capability of cooling the climate and regulating the temperature. This breathing can only be done by transpiring plants that evaporate water. The natural hydrocycle, on which our lives depend, is precisely what has been disturbed. Each kind of vegetation has a different ability to regulate temperature. For example, cornfields have a different temperature and so a different content of water than trees.
If we drain those large areas and remove vegetation from them, then heat is created within those areas during the day, while in other places it's cold. It follows that we are creating an immense potential difference in temperatures. Those great differences in temperature are trying to reach a balance through dramatic downpours and strong winds.
To politicians, designers, investors and authorities, the people who make the decisions in the country know that by drying out more and more areas, they are also destroying life in those areas. And often it is an entirely pointless process. Unused and wasted areas housing closed factories could be used for new industrial zones. It is precisely those dried fields and areas with no natural cooling created by transpiring plants that influence the air circulation in the atmosphere. As a result, dramatic meetings of hot air occur over dry areas and of cool air over humid areas. After colliding, these flows ascend to great heights, some to a cold of as much as -50 degrees centigrade. Water vapour there condenses quickly. Heavy rains then fall on relatively small areas. The victims of such rainfalls include not only houses, but also humans who are not lucky enough to be able to hide from those waves of downpour.
It was just like this phenomenon that was occurring in eastern Slovakia. The hot air, as it warmed up in the drained lowlands lacking transpiring cooling, met with the cool air over the nearby mountains. This caused condensation, resulting in tremendous downpours of rain over a relatively small area.
Extreme rainfalls occur in Europe primarily following longer drought periods. Warm air currents are spreading over increasingly larger areas. This is how the hot air from, for example, the Sahara in southern Europe extended in the summer of 2005. It met with the cool air over the Romanian mountains or over the Swiss Alps. The sudden jolt of the two currents resulted in extreme downpours of rain and subsequent flooding. It also follows that the resultant extreme weather is not necessarily produced by the same country that suffers from its impacts.
Hydrological cycle analysis show that the drying out of land results in extremes of weather, such as the extension of rainless periods and total droughts, mainly in the spring and autumn seasons, followed by extreme downpours of rain in the summer.
The dried out areas have also changed the climatic conditions in mild climate countries. This is what happened in the East Slovak lowlands, and it's quite likely that the annual floods in East Slovakia are connected with the drying out of this well-known granary. Water resource management has caused further drying out of the landscape by eliminating river meanders and littoral vegetation from the land. Rivers, made as straight as a ruler, canalise water from the area too quickly before they are able to saturate the surrounding areas with water and to cool it.
Es kann heute nicht mehr sein, dass wir
It's no longer possible to do what we were doing over the past 50 years, to confine rivers in concrete corsets. This was a misguided concept, and we have to correct it. We have to bring rivers back to their original riverbeds, but not through concrete. Thank God, the concrete stage is over.
Die Betonierphase ist weitgehend vorbei.
It wasn't only the communist countries that indulged in the elimination of water from their lands. The developed European countries made similar improvements on their fields. They came to the realisation much sooner, however, that this method of water management adjustment wasn't effective, so many countries gave up melioration several decades ago, while we, in the former Czechoslovakia, were still doing it the other way round. We even increased and started the last stage of meliorations to be extended in the submontane areas.
Humans generally do not duly appreciate the irreplaceability of water. 85% of the human body is water. When we want to preserve something, we dry it first. Then we dry our landscape and our environment. Then we eliminate life from it for a long time. Our cities are waterless, our landscape is also waterless, and it cannot fully work because it has ceased to be the main transfer of solar energy. Moreover, the situation is quite critical. In cities that are completely drained of water, we have large concrete parking areas, we build giant supermarkets with additional parking lots, and no remaining trees. We should realize that each square meter that is drained of water contributes to the strengthening and the greenhouse effect, resulting in climatic changes in a bad sense of the phrase. And each square meter that holds water and vegetation is a contribution to a better climate on the earth.
Concrete, asphalt or roofed areas overheat the air mainly during hot summer days. Can we imagine what might occur in our country with an average rise in temperature of a mere 5 degrees? and what the temperature will be in big cities at noon in view of the fact that it is already as much as 10 degrees higher than in rural areas today.
V dnešním světě naprostá většina lidí žije ve městech.
Today, most people live in cities, and they don't actually perceive how the daily weather occurs, and do not realize that the weather has changed dramatically for the worse, so nobody is much bothered by it, excepting maybe a few villagers or farmers.
Jenom ty venkovany a případně ty zemědělce.
On one hand, we need more water in the environment and in the atmosphere. In this way, the impact of heat and drought could be mitigated, but we also need a healthy landscape during extreme downpours. If fields ploughed in contour lines catch more water during storms and downpours, not allowing it to run down to villages and cities, then why not change our ploughing methods and eliminate the long precipitous lines in our hills? Rainwater runs down the precipitous lines in fields too quickly and is drained in a few minutes, causing big flooding in the lower areas and lowlands.
When traveling through Morava across the large agricultural areas, and it's the same in Slovakia, you see these long fields at the hill slopes, and it's clear what's missing. The earth's adjustment that keep water in the land, drainage defense, are what's missing. That is, balks or any green lines that don't grow following the precipitation lines, but perpendicular to the water outflow direction. Because water always flows downhill, when we give water too large a space, allowing it to accelerate its running, then we can be sure it will cause some great damage in the lower areas below its river basin.
With a camera, we tried to measure the water outflow velocity at a dried-out area. While water in the simulated meanders, that is naturally curved riverbeds, was transported only slowly, water flowed much faster through a narrowed, canalised river section. At the same time, the nutrients are drained out of the soil by the water, and soil deprived of nutrients behaves in nature almost like an impermeable plastic.
I think it's clear today that the Earth's surface covered by soil fulfills a primary production function, which is to keep the hydrocycle in the land. Water has to be kept in the soil and to flow freely. Great flooding waves must not occur, and nutrients must not be drained out of the soil. The soil with the largest content of organic matter works like a sponge. You just dig up a clod of it, and the water appears. Soil damaged by meliorations loses all its organic matter, and it's not capable of retaining water, and at which point it's just a kind of dirty sand in which no water can be held.
One more piece of proof. When we first poured a few litres of water onto a dried soil surface, we could see through the glass that it wasn't being absorbed at all. Only after 7 minutes did it soak in. This shot originally lasted over 7 minutes. It's the same in the real environment. A dry landscape cannot absorb water from downpours of rain. When we added water during our test, the result was a rise in water level, but the water still wasn't absorbed. This illustrates why the impacts of floods are increasingly dramatic.
The wetter the soil is, the more water it can absorb. This is a paradox that our water resource managers don't believe. They think the drier the soil is, the more water it can absorb. It is vital to change our methods of soil management to start to support nutrient formation in order to achieve greater ability of the soil to absorb and retain water. What matters is that water shouldn't run quickly off the land, because through a quick outflow of water, soil not only loses water, but also nutrients. Through quick water runoff, the Austrian nutrients vanish somewhere into Romania, and then we're lacking them here.
However, other important landscape managers must be also involved in these changes, the water resource managers. Most of the rivers and streams in the Slovak and Czech republics have been straightened. Water was meant to be kept in the land by dams. It is the healthy soil, however, that is serving as a water reservoir of much greater capacity than the total of all the former Czechoslovak dams have ever had. Unfortunately, the idea that the land can only be saved by canals and large dams is still dear to water managers today.
I personally think that this is due to two reasons. One, a great many of the current specialists belong to those groups who made the meliorations mentioned earlier. They've been doing this kind of work all their lives, are closely connected to those meliorations, and it's not easy for them to forget that past part of their professional life so quickly. Second, the solely economic part, it is vital to change the state subsidies policy so that food production will not be one-sidedly subsidized. Care of the landscape must also be included, with food production remaining an inseparable part, but food production cannot be the sole purpose. Cooperation is vital in each field. In water management, forest management, agriculture, only a narrow specialization is predominating. And this is why we have so much operational blindness. It should be crucial that the high ruling posts also consider the so-called generalists and give them a chance. These generalists are able to consider all the other interconnections while being bold at the same time, because the changes that we are facing today are going to be very painful.
The community of researchers who understand the cause of climatic changes in the entirety of its complex and interconnected relations is ever growing. As early as 1992, a team of Czech experts had decided to bring the land in the Jindřichov area back to its original state, before the times when small fields were vanishing in the Czech lands due to visions of great yields.
The members of a cooperative farm in Malovice, in the České Budějovice area, also merely decided to bring this inauspicious heritage to an end. We are standing in a spring area in Synnotyn in Czech Canada. In the early 1990s, this lovely landscape was one big plowed field plot. Later, grass was grown on it, but the drainage pipes were still left underground, so everything around was dried as a result of the fast water runoff from the area. In order to correct this state, it was enough just to make the balks in contour lines and to create clay barriers in order to reduce the release of underground water from the area and to care thoroughly for the greenery that's left here.
After some years of non-traditional experimentation in Synnotyn, as one of the 5 experimental areas in the Czech lands clearly showed, the landscape needed rich and diverse vegetation. In the first year of the project implementation, 1995, the plants had a much lower transpiration capacity than they had after 10 years of the microbasin's revitalization.
We have measured and proved that during 60 to 70 millimeter rainfalls, almost nothing really happens here. Originally, when there was a field like the one continuous plot that was here before, during a rainfall, water poured down the slope, causing water to flood in the village in the foothills. During the big floods in the Czech Republic in 2002, next to nothing happened here. The ponds had been a bit overfilled, and the outflow was slightly greater than usual, but the downpour wave did not occur repeatedly here again. Only 4 balks did it, the construction cost of which ponds included amounted to 450,000 Czech crowns at 1995 levels. Compared with the damage that occurred at the national level, it's a mere bagatelle, and it seems that the overall national costs of measures to correct the essential errors that were made in the past in the mountains and submontane areas is estimated at 2 to 20 billion Czech crowns in total. Actually, we can fight against big water with water. Strangely enough, but I think it's true, the thing that is the small hydrological cycle should be encouraged everywhere, in the country. This is what the agriculturalists in particular should be considering, since they directly depend on this ecological stability. But so should the state authorities responsible for area planting, and ultimately for every one of us.
The population on the Earth is growing, but is this an argument for roofing off each piece of nature and asphalting over vast areas? Many hypermarkets have been built in Slovakia recently, each with far greater sized parking lots than are needed. As time has gone by, they have been shown to be unnecessary. Instead, many green breathing and cooling areas could have remained in the cities. We have built new, supposedly more up-to-date pedestrian zones, removed the greenery from them and confined the vegetation to plant pots. But greenery placed in plant pots doesn't possess even 1% of the capacity and ability of natural soil with its rich greenery to cool the environment.
When building a house or a road, we attach them to a sewage system, and all the rainwater is drained into the canals and sent away. Such an approach, concreting, asphalting, and roofing of roads or houses, causes in Košice, which is a city I live in, an average loss of 230 liters of water from 1 square meter annually. 50 years are enough to fully destroy the hydrological cycle, and after World War II, we proved ourselves quite successful at it. Humans will not stop until they have covered the Earth's surface with concrete and canalization so that the water can flow off of it as quickly as possible. They call this order, but it's not the order of nature. This is not even a step. It's a desert where solar energy is changed into heat, and here we have the problems we spoke of before. In cities, too, we urgently need to have vegetation and greenery. We could even put them on rooftops in pots of water. This would help circulate water in the environment, cities included, provided that the solar energy shines on the city at 60 square meters. Then the heat is much greater than the energy generated by all our power plants.
If the temperature in big cities is higher than in the rural areas by 10 degrees centigrade, we won't get rid of the heat even during the night. Concrete areas release the accumulated heat in the night. This is also why we can't relax much in prefab housing estates, because we've heated them up during the day. A thermopic taken over Central Europe during one hot night confirmed this fact. The areas most affected by the heat included southern Spain, Portugal and France, as there was nothing to cool those areas during the night.
All the world is talking about the climate changes, and the world is certainly suffering from its impacts. We need an air conditioner for our globe, the Earth. I am holding one such air conditioner, part of it in my hands. It's a birch leaf. It has 50 to 100 pores on each of its square millimeters, which are devices for measuring temperature and moisture, and that open and shut according to whether the sun is shining or not, whether it's necessary to release water or not. So the few trees that we see here actually beat several man-made air conditioning devices, on which we spend incredible amounts of money in sealed buildings. Those trees, with their air conditioning devices, have been running at full power today.
Floods and windstorms always frighten us, but our fears recede with the receding waters in the cellars. We assume that nature will recover and everything will be all right.
We have around 10 years to change the management of the river basin and the management of the landscape in order to saturate and restore water in the land. Otherwise, floods will be on the increase. Weather extremes will occur with greater and greater frequency. One natural calamity will follow another. Droughts and fires will occur, and we will not be able to stop it if we do not bring water back to the land.
Over 90% of the people in high posts who make the decisions usually clothe themselves in architecturally highly attractive buildings made of glass or aluminium, of stylish design with air conditioning. Most of them don't even notice when the calamities are on their doorstep, except when they're calculating the damage caused by floods.
If we are to stop climatic changes, we have to bring water back and vegetation back, so that natural air conditioning devices are restored to the largest areas possible. And similarly, we have to create evaporating areas amidst the grains in the fields, either as oak forests or intervalves, on which the sun shines, so that they can bring back solar energy. This is a general recipe for perfect air conditioning, a plant saturated with water.
Slovakia lies on the roof of Europe. It is rich with diversified reliefs and spring areas where the drop starts its pilgrimage. Quite slowly and innocently. Gradually, it enriches the springs, creeks and rivers that saturate the valleys. It is a wealth greater than the most prestigious bank accounts. Its value may decrease rapidly, provided that we refuse to realise that the landscape's air conditioner is out of order. The longer we take to accept this fact, the more frequently and strongly we will be hit by extreme weather.
If no change occurs, not only a change of mind, but also a change in the land, then we can expect our descendants to be unhappy, because each year they'll have to worry about what's going to happen next. If we don't do something about it, our children will be unhappy.
In 2005's floods in Romania, Bulgaria, France, Austria or Switzerland are just another memento for Central Europe. The floods showed how strong they could be, but they also warned us that the incidence of calamities is not now increasing from year to year, but based on recent evidence, from month to month.